Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela and this is podcast episode number 27. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, and a huge thank you to all of the new subscribers that I got since the last video. You're very welcome to the channel and I hope you enjoy my videos. On the topic of subscribers, I will be announcing the winner of the 5k giveaway in today's video, so stay tuned for that. I was completely overwhelmed by the number of comments in the last video. Thank you so much to everyone who entered the giveaway. I really tried to reply to every comment, but I just couldn't. It wasn't within my capabilities. I usually get around to replying to comments within 2 days of them being posted, or at least I try to. But there was just so many coming in that I got to a point where some of the comments were 6 or 7 days old before I replied. And then I would sit down and clear all of the comments that were there. And I'd think, okay, thank God, I got cleared all of those comments, no more to reply to. And then more would start coming in over the next few days. So I just couldn't keep on top of it. It was so hard to reply to them all, and I just couldn't do it. So I do apologise if I didn't reply to yours, but I did read every single one, and I'm very grateful for all of the support on that video, so thank you so much. So it's been 4 weeks since my last upload. It wasn't my intention to leave it this long between uploads, but just life got busy and I haven't really had a chance to sit down properly until today. I was trying to record last weekend, but I had other things going on and I would have been really rushed and the video wouldn't have been as good and I wouldn't have enjoyed recording it as much because I would have had in the back of my mind, I need to wrap this up so I can get going on my other life stuff that I have to do. But I have a free day today, so we're just going to take our time today and go through all of my knitting progress from the last 4 weeks, which there is a lot of. Between all of my whips and finished objects, I actually have 6 potential projects that I could update you on, but I only physically have 3 to show you, so we'll get into that as we go on. And I also have some plans and things that I want to talk about as well. I'm wearing my Winnie top. This is a pattern by Lily Kate Makes. It was actually a test knit for Lily earlier in the summer. I used Cardiff Cashmere Classic in the colour Cameo for mine. I've worn this a few times already. I really love it. Love the colour, love how soft the yarn is. I knit it exactly to pattern since it was a test knit, so I didn't make any modifications or anything, but if you're interested in checking out my project page, I'll link it in the description box below. And similarly, everything that I talk about today will be linked in the description box below. So if you're interested in any of the projects that I showed today, feel free to check them out on Ravelry. And with that out of the way, we'll get into my finished objects. I have finished a total of 4 projects since the last episode, but 2 of them are currently on the blocking mat, and they're 2 pretty significant ones. They're my Dagmar zipper sweater and my Alpine Bloom tee, so I won't be talking about those, and that will be a significant chunk of time taken out of today's podcast episode, but that's okay. I don't want to talk about them because I think blocking will have a really big effect on both of them. One is all over cabled and one has some colour work and some lace, so I think blocking will make a big difference and it's worth waiting to show them in the next episode. Sometimes I will show a finished object if it hasn't been blocked, if I think that blocking isn't going to make a huge difference to how it looks, but in this case I think blocking is an important part of the process, so I'm going to wait until that's done and I'll show them in the next episode. However, the other finished object that I have are my vanilla socks, which I talked about in the last episode. I knit these using a Pigment and Ply hand-dyed yarn. It actually came as a sock set, but I didn't use the contrast colour that came in the sock set for the heel and the toe, and I'll talk about that. But the main colour is called Proud Maisie. It's a very highly variegated yarn and I can't even pick a dominating colour in there because every time I look at it I see a different colour. I see pinks, I see greens, blues, oranges. There's just so much in there. I love it. I had so much fun knitting these socks and watching these colours come to life. In the last episode I asked for your opinions on what colour I should knit the heel and the toe. I'll put pictures of the choices back up on the screen here, but I had also asked on Instagram and most people voted for the olive green. Although the teal colour was a close second, the olive green was the winner, whereas on YouTube the vast majority was the teal colour. I didn't tally them up. I started tallying up the answers that people were giving in the comments. I very quickly realised that there was no point because the teal winner was just the obvious winner out of all of the colours. So I did decide to try the olive green since it won the Instagram poll because I had a feeling that I wouldn't like it and I was right. So I figured I'd try it out, give it a go and just confirm that I didn't like it before I eventually switched back to the teal, and I think the teal is a much better option. I think it goes absolutely amazingly with this variegated yarn because there is already teal in the yarn, but not so much that it completely outshines the other colours. So I think this teal colour really complements the variegated yarn so nicely. And if you're curious, this is Ballyhora Fibres 4-ply sock base in the colour Lake Muskery. I cast on 60 stitches and I worked 2x2 rib for 20 rounds, and then I did 50 rounds, 60 rounds for the foot, sorry. I did a slip stitch, heel flap and gusset. I worked 18 rounds for the heel flap And then after the heel turn was done, I decreased down to 60 stitches on the foot for the gusset. And then I did a standard wedge toe. I used to do symmetrical toes. I've shown a few of those on the podcast, but I personally don't find they fit any different, and it's a little bit more effort. So I just figure I'll stick with the wedge toe because, yeah, I just don't personally find it worth the extra effort to do a symmetrical toe. But yeah, so vanilla socks, very happy with these, and I'd love to knit another pair of vanilla socks very, very shortly. My next finished object is one of those that I haven't blocked because I just don't think the blocking will make a significant enough difference to justify not showing it on the podcast for another couple of weeks. And it's also a new cast on since the last episode. So I did talk about this in the last episode, that I was going to make a beanie with 2 yarns that have, well, one of the 2 has been in my stash for a long time. And I have always kind of struggled to figure out what to do with it, and eventually decided that I wanted to make a beanie and hold it with a lovely variegated yarn. So the 2 yarns in question are Madeline Tosh Merino Light in the colour Gigi Loves Orange. It's a single ply merino, and I held it with a silk mohair from All You Knit Is Love, which is a yarn shop in Barcelona, and the colour is called Sangria Popsicle. And when I showed these 2 yarns on the podcast last episode, so many of you shared enthusiasm for wanting to see what they look like knit up, which was really exciting because I was also very enthusiastic about seeing what they look like together. So it was nice that my enthusiasm was shared, and I actually think they look fantastic knitted up together. I love how it turned out. As for a pattern, I did not follow a specific pattern for this. I've made this kind of beanie before. It's basically a mishmash of a few different patterns, or 2 different patterns, specifically the Brownstone Beanie by Tori Yu, and I was going to say the Musselburgh, but I usually do the Musselburgh style decreases, but I actually didn't do those on this one, so I'll talk about that. But basically I cast on with a provisional cast on, so I cast on 112 stitches, and I used a crochet provisional cast on, and I worked until the brim was twice the length that I wanted it to be, so that I could fold it over and get a double folded brim. So I folded it over and I knit the live stitches together with the provisional cast on, and then I worked a few more rounds of stockinette. I don't know if you can see with the variegation, you can kind of see there, yeah. And then I worked a German short row turn so that my stockinette was now on the outside of the hat. So that technique is used in the Brownstone Beanie, which I've knit before and I really like it. And that way, when you fold the hat up, it's very difficult to show. I've tried to show this before on the podcast and I really struggle. But when you fold the hat up, if the brim does roll, you'll see plain, like the right side of the stockinette. You won't see the little purl bumps. Whereas if you just started knitting this stockinette section down here after you join the brim, when you're wearing the hat, you might get a little bit of a reverse stockinette bit peeking out. So I hope that makes sense. It's a really nice technique and I use it in a lot of hats that I make. After joining the brim together, I worked 16 centimeters, so that's including that little reverse stockinette section there, and then I started decreases. For the decreases, I did like a 4-point decrease, so I split my stitches into 4, and I placed a marker every 20, I think it was every 28 stitches. For the decreases, I did a knit 1, I knit 2 together, and then I worked until there were 3 stitches before the next marker. I did a slip knit, and then I did another knit stitch. I did similar decreases on the last hat that I made, except I had 1 stitch in between the 2 decreases instead of 2, and that column of stitches in between the 2 decreases was quite gappy, so on this hat I decided to do 2 stitches in between the decreases to see if that would help, and I still think it looks a little bit gappy, but maybe not as bad as the first hat that I made. If anyone has any suggestions on how I can mitigate that, I would love to hear them. I will block this. I found that blocking really does help the fold stay in place, and also where the reverse stockinette section is, where the reverse stockinette section switches to regular stockinette, it tends to kind of like, I don't know how to say it, like scrunch in on itself, and when you block it, it will just like relax out. So it will be a little bit taller once it's blocked because you get an extra, not even a centimetre, I'd say half a centimetre maybe of height, but it just makes it feel smoother on my head. Like if I put this on now, I need to fix the fold to get it to sit the way I want it to, whereas once I block it, it will just sit naturally. Yeah, what do you think? I really like it. Forgot to mention my gauge. It is 22 stitches in 10 centimeters, and as I said, I cast on 112 stitches, so that should give me 51 centimeter of circumference. I have no idea what my head circumference is in centimeters. I only know in inches. I switch between inches and centimeters a lot. It's really annoying. So I don't know what my head circumference is, and let me just Google it. Okay, my head circumference is apparently 56 centimeters, and this is 51 centimeters. Did I say 51? Yeah, 51 centimeters. So there's 5 centimeters of negative ease in this. I don't know what's standard for a hat, but it fits quite nicely, so I'm happy with it. When I was thinking about the mohair that I wanted to hold with that orange yarn, the orange yarn is the one that's been in my stash for so long, I did want something that would tone it down so that it wouldn't be like pure luminous orange. Now I know this is still obviously very bright, but I think the variegation helps to make it a little bit more wearable rather than looking just like, I suppose I will still look like a traffic cone when I wear this, but I don't think I'll look like as much of a traffic cone. Like I'll look like a colourful traffic cone. So there is some mental acrobatics going on to help me justify knitting this hat when I was so opposed to knitting just the pure orange on its own. Like this is obviously still very bright, but I do love it, so I'm really happy with my choice. Moving on to whips. I feel like today might be a short episode. This feels like going really fast. I have 2 whips, but one of them I've frogged with the intention of starting over. I haven't started it over yet, so I don't have anything on the needles, but I do have photos, so I'll talk about the progress that I made so far anyway. And that is the Thru Lines shawl by Andrew Murray. Just for some background, within my knitting group, we're kind of doing a little bit of a knit along, and the theme is a painting called St. Stephen's Green in Autumn. I think there's a longer name, but I can't remember. I keep getting it wrong. It's either Autumn in St. Stephen's Green or St. Stephen's Green in Autumn. St. Stephen's Green is a park in Dublin city centre, and the painting is just off this park in the autumn. So we decided to do this knit along because we didn't want to pick one colour that people had to knit or one pattern that people had to knit. So we figured if we picked a painting with a nice range of colours in it, that you could pick one or more colours or even take your own inspiration from the painting. So even though the painting is mostly like yellows and blues, it doesn't really have any greens in it, but if Dublin in autumn or St. Stephen's Green in autumn to you evokes a green colour, you can knit something green. So it's very, very, very flexible. We just kind of thought it would be nice to have kind of a communal project that we could all meet up and share and talk about. So it's been really, really nice. I did talk about it in my Australia and New Zealand yarn haul because I got yarn specifically for it when I was in New Zealand, and we met up last weekend to have like a little cast on party. So that was really fun. We met up in St. Stephen's Green, which was iconic because the painting is in St. Stephen's Green, and the weather was really nice, and it was just a really lovely, lovely day. So I decided to cast on the Thru Line shawl by Andrew Murray, as I said. This is a triangular increasing shawl with this really lovely slip stitch striped pattern. The gauge is 24 stitches, however I didn't gauge swatch because I'm a bit lax when it comes to gauge swatching and shawls and scarves, because I figure if they turn out too big or too small, they'll still do the job of a shawl or scarf. I'm using 3.5mm needles, and the yarn that I'm using is 3 different yarns. So for the main colour I'm using Happy Go Knitty, which is a New Zealand hand dyed yarn company, and I'm using her Mardi base, which is 60% wool, 20% yak and 20% silk, and this is the colour Emerald Lake, and it's a fingering weight yarn as suggested by the pattern. For one of the contrast colours, the pattern uses a spin cycle yarn, and I decided to splurge when I was in New Zealand, and I did buy a skein of spin cycle dyed in the wool. A big reason why I felt justified in buying this was because the colourway I bought is exclusive to the wool shop Lupine, which is in Auckland, New Zealand. And of course that is the ultimate souvenir yarn, so I felt a bit justified in buying it, even though it was definitely a bougie purchase. And previously I've had conversations with myself in the past where I've told myself I'll never buy a spin cycle yarn because they're just so expensive, but yeah, I caved, so no regrets. The colourway is lovely. Actually, I do have that one. So as I said, I have frogged it, and I kind of just wound the yarn back up into the ball, so I can't really see the colours in there, but it's mostly yellow and there's a bit of pink and purples in there too. With the Miss Rumphius colourway, I was looking at their website and I found that most of the skeins are a lot more purple than yellow, whereas I wanted more yellow in my skein because the painting has a bit more yellow in it and it doesn't really have any purple. So I was hoping to find a mostly yellow skein when I was actually in the shop, and thankfully I did. So I was delighted to find this and pick this up. And as for the third colour in the shawl, I was really unsure about it for a long time. I didn't get anything in New Zealand for it. I just couldn't find something that I liked or that I thought would go with the other 2 colours. So last weekend, just before our cast on party, actually, I went to the yarn shop first and I was like, I really need to get a third yarn for this or else I have nothing to cast on. So I went into my local yarn shop and I was holding up a bunch of different colours to the 2 colours that I had, and I was being helped by a shop assistant there, and we picked out this green colour. And when I held the three of them up, the two of us just looked at each other like, this is it, that's it. And I loved it. I really, really loved this colour. It's a beautiful colour. This is Fonty BB's Merino, and the colour, I get the label, the colour is, it says 956. I don't know if that's the lot number or the colour number. 956, and below that it says 071222. So I'm assuming one of those is the colour and one is the lot number. I'll pop it up on the screen anyway. But yeah, so I started knitting my shawl, and immediately I was like a bit unsure about the green being knitted up. I loved it in the ball. I loved it holding it up against the other two yarns, but knitted up, it was really, really dominant, and I really felt like it drew the eye away, not only from the spin cycle, but also from the blue yarn. I just felt like it was all I could see when I looked at it. And as I said, I was with my knitting group. We had our cast on party, so I was asking everyone for opinions, and everyone loved it. And I mean, I did love the colours together. I just don't think it was what I envisioned for this scarf. The green was really dominating over the spin cycle, and after a lot of thinking and looking at the pattern and the sample photos, I realised that no matter what colour I picked for that third colour, it was going to be a dominant colour over the spin cycle, because for every row of the spin cycle there was 2 rows of this third colour. In the pattern you work a stripe of this colour, and then a stripe of the spin cycle, and then a stripe with this colour again. So the spin cycle is bordered top and bottom by this colour, so no matter what colour you pick for this one, it's going to kind of overshadow the spin cycle. So I looked through a bunch of project pages, and I looked at the sample photos, and I kind of realised that the spin cycle yarn isn't very dominant when the photos are up close. You really only see the colour changing effect when the whole shawl is shown from start to finish, and I really like that. So I guess I just needed to kind of adjust my expectations, because I wasn't going to see the colour, the spin cycle colourway wasn't going to stand out at that close distance that I was looking at it from, you know, while I was knitting it. I needed to kind of trust the process and wait until the scarf was finished. The beauty of the spin cycle yarn would be in that shift of colour from start to finish, and not necessarily within those 2 individual plies. Because if you're not familiar with spin cycle, it has 2 plies that are kind of wound around each other, and my initial hope was that you would see these colours within the shawl kind of at a close-up distance, but I think the real effect is going to be the shift in the colour from start to finish. Taking that all into account, I still decided that I wasn't super happy with the green, and I did give it a good shot, and then I decided to try some other colours that I had in stash to see if there was anything that I preferred. So I knit a stripe in this marzipan colour, and I also knit another stripe in this kind of ochre yellow colour. And when I knit the ochre yellow, I was like, okay, I think that's it. So I really like the ochre yellow colour. I also think it reflects the painting a lot better as well. So there's no green in the painting, as I said at the start, but for me, I do want my project to reflect the colours in the painting, and the green was kind of being so dominant as well. It was just kind of taking away from the colours in my scarf that were present in the painting. So if I use an ochre yellow instead, I just feel like it's a lot more reflective of the painting, and I'll be a lot happier with the project. I had no second thoughts about the ochre yellow. As soon as I knitted up that stripe, I knew that that was the colour I wanted. Actually, before I even knit up the stripe, I had a very, very good feeling about it. So I knit the stripe, was really happy with it, was like, yes, let's go with that. It obviously is still, as I said, dominating over the spin cycle, because there's twice as much of it per stripe as the spin cycle, but it doesn't draw the eye as much as the green did. I should probably show you the yarn. This is Kremke Soul Wool Edelweiss Alpaca 4-ply in the colour Honey. This comes in 25 gram balls, and I usually get it for contrast cuff, heel and toes in socks, because it's such a small amount that it's just perfect for those little small amounts of the sock. This is 13 grams remaining of this, and it's all I have. So I do need to get more, which is why I haven't cast on my scarf yet. I'm hoping to get more today. I had a look at the website of my local yarn shop, and I feel like they might be stopping selling this because it's been on sale for a while and there's a very limited amount of colours left. So I have a feeling that they're maybe not going to be selling it anymore, but when I go in today I might ask them and check. They do have 2 balls of this left on the website, which is perfect because I need 2 balls. The pattern calls for 50 grams of this colour. In the pattern it's a Brooklyn tweed yarn, I think it's Loft. Yeah, Brooklyn tweed Loft, and it calls for 50 grams. So if I get 2 balls of this plus this little remainder here, I'll have 63 grams, which sounds like it's enough, but there are meterage differences between this and the Brooklyn tweed Loft. So I think 63 grams it should be enough, but it's not so much that I'm like 100% confident, you know. This will probably be my limiting yarn in this project. I am going to weigh it and see how far I can get with half of that amount, and if I need to stop increasing sooner and start decreasing, I'll do that. It's no problem. As for the pattern, I really love it. I had a lot of fun knitting it up. There are ribbed sections in the main colour in between the stripes, which I didn't notice in the sample photos, but I think that makes sense because the sample photos are knit in a very dark colour. But I really liked those ribbing sections. I feel like they add a really nice textured interest to the scarf. The repeat took me a while to get used to. I think I was about 10 repeats in before I felt like I could do it without looking at the pattern. But even then, I found myself second guessing things and having to double check the pattern just to confirm that I was doing the right thing. But I really enjoyed it while I had it on the needles, and I'm looking forward to starting it again. As for the knit along, it's such a nice experience. We have our own little WhatsApp group and we've been sharing photos, and it's so nice to see everyone's projects with the same kind of colour scheme but also being so different at the same time. It's really nice, and yeah, I'm really excited to continue this. I think we're going to do it for 3 months, so it'll be for the autumn season, I guess. It's not like a social media cal, so we're only kind of doing it when we meet up, and in our WhatsApp group we're sharing photos. But if anyone feels inspired by the painting and wants to knit something with those colours, absolutely feel free to do so. As I said, it's not a social media thing. There's no start date, end date, prizes, whatever. We do have a hashtag for when we share on Instagram. It's Dublin in Autumn Cal. I'll just pop it on the screen. So if you're also feeling inspired by the painting and want to knit something, you can feel free to use that hashtag or not, whatever you want. Do whatever makes you happy. My next whip is one that I do have with me, and it might have clanky needles, so I'm sorry. This is the Nightlight shawl by Andrea Mary, and I'm knitting this for my boyfriend. So this is also a triangular increasing shawl with slip stitch pattern, so it's very similar to the Thru Lines shawl. The gauge for this is 20 stitches and 10 centimeters, and it's knit with a thicker yarn. So the Thru Lines shawl are all fingering or sport weight yarns, whereas this is DK and worsted yarn. I think it's Stephanie Spin Cycle Dream State, which is her worsted weight yarn, I think, and I can't remember what the other colour is that she uses. I'm obviously not using a Spin Cycle for this. I'm using 2 solid colours. These are both from Brushtail Yarns, which is a New Zealand yarn company, and it's their upcycled merino possum yarn. So this is one of the exciting yarns that I got in New Zealand with a bit of possum in there. I was very excited to try possum yarn when I went to New Zealand. I think it's 80% merino and 20% possum. And the 2 colours that I'm using are red, which is the basic standard red, and then the dark burgundy is called Firefly. Firefly yarn is actually a 4-ply or a fingering weight because I couldn't get a DK weight yarn on the day, so I just got fingering weight and I decided to hold it double. I didn't really think that through because the red yarn, being an 8-ply or DK, it's 130 meters in 50 grams, whereas the fingering weight one is 200 meters in 50 grams. So holding the fingering weight yarn double means that it's 100 meters in 50 grams, and the DK one is 130. So the fingering weight one held double is a bit thicker than the DK one held single. So I was a bit worried once I realized that. I had already gotten a little bit into the scarf, and I was wondering if that would affect the gauge or if it would make it look funny, but I actually think it's fine. I don't think there's any issues. The recommended yarn, did I say this was Thru Lines? This is Nightlights, yes. I get mixed up between the two now. The recommended yarn in the Nightlight shawl are 2 different weights as well, so I don't think I've anything to worry about in that regard. I got these yarns at the Knit Nook, which is a yarn shop in New Zealand, and I talked about that in my New Zealand yarn haul, but basically the shop was closing down that day, so they've moved all their stuff online for the time being. I didn't realise this. I didn't even know the shop was there. We were kind of about to leave that town, and I was like, let me just check if there's a yarn shop before we go. Saw on Google Maps that there was one right around the corner. We went. It was empty, like there was hardly anything in there, so I kind of did a quick look around, and then I was walking out, and as I left I turned around and I saw that there was a sign on the window saying 20% off everything, and I was like, okay, well, I have to go back in now. Went back in. I asked the owner, is everything 20% off? Because like they had some really nice yarns, and she's like, oh, it's 40% off. And I was like, okay, I have to get stuff now. So that's why I got those yarns. That's why they didn't have any 8-ply of the Firefly colour left. It was just everything was out of stock, and I pretty much got the last of, well, some of the last of the possum merino yarn, which was really cool. So as I said, I have 2 Andrea Mary shawls on my needles at the moment. I ideally would have waited until the Thru Lines shawl was done before I cast on the Nightlight shawl, but I want to use this red yarn for the berries in the holly sweater, which is the Knitting for Olive Christmas jumper, and because it's a Christmas jumper I have to start that in I'm going to start it in September, hopefully, and I want to make sure that I have enough red yarn left for this shawl and I don't accidentally use it up doing the berries in that jumper. I think I have more than enough red yarn for this shawl. I got 3 balls, so that's 390 meters, and I think the pattern only calls for 300 or something like that, so I should definitely have enough. But again, just taking into account like different meterages between this yarn and the recommended yarn, I just wanted to make sure that I definitely have enough before I start the holly sweater. So I'm going to get to the halfway point of this, and if I have more than half of the red yarn left, I think I'll be safe to use it in my holly sweater. But yeah, I don't think I'll have anything to worry about in that regard. This is a lot easier to memorize than the Thru Lines shawl. I think I only did about 4 repeats before I got confident in working the pattern without looking at it. I do find myself zoning out a little bit when I'm knitting this because a lot of the rows are very similar, or else you're kind of working a row as it appears, as the row below appears. So like if the stitch below is a knit stitch, you're working a knit stitch and that kind of thing. So it's kind of easy to zone out, and then I find myself making mistakes because I get to a row where I actually do need to do something different, and just out of habit I just keep the pattern going, and I only notice on the following row when I knit back and I'm like, okay, that should be a knit stitch, I slipped it, you know. So it's okay now because the rows are kind of short and it's not too much of a hassle to undo it, but it's obviously going to get bigger, so I hope by the time the rows are a good bit bigger that I won't make as many mistakes with it. I am making just one small modification, so you can see here, this stitch here is actually an increase. It's worked like a right lifted increase, except you slip it instead of knitting it, and that's what I did down here. If I can see it here, that's what I did here, and I think you can see like it looks a bit gappy, like it just looks strange. I don't like how it looks. So the next time I did it, I twisted that slip stitch and it looks much better. So I did that the whole way up then. So I've been twisting that slipped stitch just on the rows where I increase with a slipped stitch. This yarn is so soft. I'm trying to think of another yarn that I could compare it to, but I'm finding it difficult. The closest thing I can think is La Como Grande, which I used last year to make a cardigan for my mum. So if you've knit with that, I would say that this feels quite similar. I feel like there's heat radiating off this, like it's so warm, and I got some for a jumper for myself as well, so I'm really excited to knit that. It's very thick, it's very plush, it's very smooth. I feel like if this was just stockinette, you wouldn't be able to feel the individual stitches. It's a lovely yarn. I'm really excited that I finally got to try this. Again, I didn't gauge swatch for this, but I have just quickly measured across, and my gauge is looking at the moment to be about 21 stitches and 10 centimeters. I don't expect this to grow much with blocking, so it is a little bit tighter of a gauge than the pattern suggests, but that's okay. I think with shawls like this, I always, it's very hard to tell how the drape is going to be, because when it's such a small triangle, it doesn't really have much drape, but it's getting bigger now and I feel like it does have a nice bit of drape. So yeah, I think this will turn out really nice. My boyfriend knows that I'm knitting this for him. Like when I picked out the yarns, I showed him the pattern as well, and I said, you know, if I knit you this with these yarns, would you like it? He said yes. I don't think he knows I'm knitting it right now, so I might try and keep it a surprise and give it to him at Christmas or something. So yeah. And the last thing is that the I-cord edge is curling in, as you can see, but the pattern actually specifically mentions that and says that it will block out, so I'm not worried about that either. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this. It's not mindless. I wouldn't call it mindless by any means, but it's definitely not the most difficult pattern in the world either. And I've seen a few people knitting this actually. I saw someone on Instagram posted on their story, and I didn't even realize it was this pattern. And I was like, oh, that looks really nice. I should make that. Or I was going to ask them what it was, and I didn't. But as I started knitting this, I was like, okay, actually, I think they were knitting this. So that was kind of funny. So that is all of my project updates. I do want to talk about some plans. And I know in the last episode, I said that I would knit the cami number 7. This is why I don't talk about my plans, because they always change. I'm not going to knit the cami number 7 now. My intention was to cast on the cami number 7 once I finished the Alpine Bloom. I took a lot longer to finish the Alpine Bloom than I thought I would. I finished the body and then I just wasn't motivated to work on the sleeves at all, which is funny to me because I never get that kind of trepidation when knitting sleeves on long jumpers or long sleeve jumpers. I don't get second sleeve syndrome, or I don't get stuck on sleeve island. Like, I don't mind knitting sleeves at all. But for the Alpine Bloom tee, you have to cast on that lace cuff and work it from the bottom up, and then you graft it to your sleeve. And I just found it really hard to get the motivation to cast on again and to work more lace. I just wasn't looking forward to it. So I kind of ignored it for a while and eventually got around to finishing it. I only finished it a couple of days ago. We're now in the middle of August. I'm not in a summer knitting mood anymore, but I'm not really a big summer knitter anyway. I kind of get an itch to knit 2 summer tops a year. I've already scratched that itch this year. I did have an itch to knit the cami number 7 like all summer, and I just kept telling myself I'd get around to it, or just kind of getting bumped to the bottom of the list. And now we've kind of reached the end of summer and I'm like, that's okay, I'll just knit it next summer. So yeah, forget about that plan, it didn't happen. But I do have 2 very concrete plans that I've swatched for, I wound yarn for, like I'm going to start them this weekend. So they're definitely going to happen. The first thing that I want to make, I was kind of waiting until I finished the Dagmar zipper sweater to make it, but it has been on my list for a long time, and that is the Leon sweater by Petite Knit. And this pattern was gifted to me by a viewer, so thank you so much. I'm blown away by your generosity and kindness. I'm just so grateful that it's just unbelievable to me that complete strangers will give me a pattern for because they enjoy my content. Like, it's just, yeah, it means the world to me. So I am so grateful. I don't take it for granted. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. But yeah, so I've been really excited to make that. I'm going to make a stripless version, just plain stockinette, and the yarn that I'm going to use is from Hedgehog Fibres. So Hedgehog Fibres, they have a studio in Cork, which is in the south of Ireland. I don't think a lot of people realise that. But it's not in Cork City, and it's not the easiest to get to, but also not the most difficult place to get to in Ireland. So I think you have to there's like a half-hour train from Cork City and then maybe a 10-minute walk. The only thing is that there's not really anything else around it, so you'd kind of be doing that journey just to go to Hedgehog Fibres, which I personally think is worth it, but maybe you wouldn't. The reason I think it's worth it is because when I went, they had a basket of yarn that was 50% off. And I went in intending just to get a skein of sock yarn or something, but when I saw a basket of 50% off yarn, I again just felt like, I love a good deal. I can't walk away from that. So I actually went on to Ravelry there and I was like frantically scrolling, trying to find a pattern that I could make with the yarn that was in the basket, because there wasn't a huge selection. It was a basket about this size. It was quite small. But they did have a sweater quantity of their Merino Aran base, and it was in this beautiful red colour. So as I said, I went on to Ravelry, I was looking for patterns, eventually settled on the Leon pattern. One thing I love about the Leon sweater is the shoulder construction. So I've looked at the pattern and it's actually the same as the Poppy Tee, or I believe the Maggie cardigan is probably the same as well, just with different stitch and row counts, but the construction is the same. It's a contiguous shoulder, which I really like. And I also really like the neckline. I don't know if there's anything specific going on there, but I feel like it looks kind of open and it's not like, it doesn't look like it's choking up here. So yeah, I am really excited to cast that on. I did ask in the shop, like, why is this 50% off? Because I just wanted to make sure I wasn't taking something home that is, I don't know, terrible quality or something. But she just said the colour didn't turn out the way that it was supposed to. So it's supposed to be the colourway Sin, which is a red colour. I'll put a picture up here of what it's supposed to look like, and here's mine. I think they look very similar. Now there are maybe patches where maybe the dye didn't take as well, but like, I don't think it even looks defective. I think it's supposed to be like that. I don't know. There's also, I can't see it in this cake or in this swatch, but some of the skeins that I bought look like they have kind of a splotch of burgundy in them, but like, I don't mind that either. Overall, I don't see anything wrong with this yarn, and I think I got a fantastic deal at 50% off, so very excited to cast this on. As you can see, I have swatched. I've been holding up my swatch this whole time. The gauge for this is 20 stitches and 10 centimeters. I got 19.5 stitches after blocking. That's fine with me. I swatched on a 4mm needle, and I don't want to go down any lower because this is an iron weight yarn and I feel like working on a smaller needle will be quite hard on my hands. So I'm quite happy to stick with the 4mm needle, and if it turns out slightly more oversized than it's supposed to be, that's okay. The next thing I want to cast on is another pair of vanilla socks, and this is with a self-striping yarn that I got from Mud Punch, which is a Canadian self-striping yarn dyer. I have a friend living in Vancouver and I had these delivered to her last Christmas, and she brought them home when she was visiting. So I was so excited to try some self-striping yarn. I've never used it before. I've always wanted to, but I find that there's not a huge selection of self-striping yarn dyers in Europe. If you know of any, please do let me know, because I would love to try more self-striping yarns. I know of Nicole C. Mendez, and I think that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, the colourway that I'm using is called Rock the Float. And okay, I sometimes put my yarn into socks to stop it from falling apart, only if I'm pulling from the middle of the cake, because as you pull from the middle of the cake, it starts to collapse in on itself and it goes really messy. So I do have it in a sock. It's a clean sock, but let me show you the colours that are in there. Is yellows, whites, sorry. It's yellow, white, and then this turquoise colour, and there's also a dark blue. I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, very excited to knit that up. Got my centre pull string ready to go. As I said, I'll probably cast that on this weekend. To me, this is a summer colour. It's called Rock the Float, and I wanted to knit it in the summer. So I'm kind of bumping it to the top of my sock list because I want to knit this yarn while it's still summer-ish. And those are all of my updates for today, which brings us to the part that you've all been waiting for. I will announce the giveaway winners now. So if you need a recap of the prizes, there are 2 prizes. One is from Eru, which is an Irish yarn brand. It's 5 colours from their Kingfisher palette. And the other prize is a sock set from Ballihora Fibres. It's got a main skein of 100 grams and 2 20-gram mini skeins. And with that one, I'll also include some stitch markers from Hello Kim, which are like Irish themed stitch markers. I would have loved to give everyone a choice of prizes, but I think logistically that would have been so difficult, because some people might not have had any preference. Some people might have wanted the sock set, and if they didn't get the sock set, they wouldn't have wanted anything at all. And I feel like it just would have been a lot of back and forth with potential winners to try and make everyone happy. And ultimately, it's very difficult to make everyone happy. So the easiest and fairest way that I think I can do this is I pulled 2 winners. The first winner will get first pick of the prizes, and the second winner will get the remaining prize. So I hope everyone's happy with that. So I've basically picked 2 winners. If you could both contact me at stitchesinstem@gmail.com. Please do reach out to me within the next 2 weeks to claim your prize, and I'll organise the distribution of the prizes with both of you. So without further ado, the first winner is JL Heinritz. Congratulations. And the second winner is Melissa VR-G7B. Sorry, I wouldn't have remembered that, so I had to read it off my screen. I'll put both of the usernames up here. That's the first winner and the second winner. As I said, please do contact me at stitchesinstem@gmail.com. If you can send me an email within the next 2 weeks, I'll get those prizes out to you. So thank you to everyone who entered. Congratulations to the winner. There will be more giveaways in the future. I had a lot of fun picking out these prizes. Thank you again for all of your support. And that brings us to the end of today's video. So thank you so much for watching. If you stuck to the end, I really, really appreciate it. Please do give it a thumbs up if you like this video. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions about anything that I talked about. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.